Tonight I'm going to be playing Spellbook, a 6 elements game by Edereen Mohammed Noor. It's based on the Lost and Found SRD, lostandfound.games. This is a solo journaling game about creating a sentient spellbook that is passed down through time from witch to witch. In this game, you'll be playing from the perspective of the spellbook, recording spells you create with your witches, as well as detailing your history with them and how you join and leave a coven. You'll need a way to document your journey, pen and paper, word processor, etc. You'll see I have a text file up here. I also have a paint window, and I have a dice roller. Need 1d6, and if you want to randomize some other events, you need a few d4s. I'm going to be using the dice roller window for exactly that. You're welcome to use the same to construct a physical book for the spells composed, in addition to creating the book's history. I will note here it also it says to take care of yourself while playing. It's okay to pause or tap out if things get too heavy. Your mental and emotional health matter. So step one of our game is creating our spell book. What material are you made of? Is this material difficult or easy to find? Has it been meant to be used as a spell book from the start? I would like to open my door so my cat shuts up. I like to think that this was a quite simple book. You're going to be hearing Fozzie chirp throughout this, so that cannot be helped. I believe the covers were made of thin birchwood. Not birchwood, something harder. Maybe like an oak, but really thin sheaves of oak, sanded nice and thin, and then bound in cloth, wrapped very tightly in a cloth, and probably glued down. I don't know what sort of glue they would use, probably some sort of animal glue to glue the cloth down to the wooden slats, and then also for the binding itself. It's my horrendous drawing here. Let's get some pages. I think the materials to get this book were relatively inexpensive to get but they needed craftsmanship. The oak was of course easy enough to get, but to get it planed down nice and thin, probably fire hardened as well to make it a little sturdier. Let's get the back here. There's probably some stitching along here as well. The materials were nice and cheap. It was more a matter of the craftsmanship needed for them. I don't know who made me, but it was clear that this is somebody who has made books before, somebody well versed in the craft of making an empty volume or binding other volumes together. So it was likely in a large city, where there would be need for books to be bound, books to be written. This is definitely in a time period before there were anything like a printing press. So people would keep journals. People would, back in like I want to say the early 600s, or even before I don't know when the printing press was invented, but before the printing press, you would have rooms and rooms of priests who were priests and monks who would copy the Bible by hand. Every day in and day out, they would copy the Bible by hand, so they would have copies of the Bible to distribute to priests and whatnot. And I imagine this is not necessarily that sort of operation, but um, this is somebody who makes finer journals, probably for a fair price to be sold to nobles, to governors, to dukes. Somebody who would have need to keep a ledger. And in fact, I think on the front is a nice, finely shaped rectangle of leather. It's been a while since I used paint here. I think they used a nice, like, blood red cloth. And then stamped in here, letter by letter, much neater than I'm writing it, is the word ledger. And imagine this is stamped in like a nice fancy way that doesn't look like a kindergartner wrote it. And I don't believe it was meant to be used as a spell book from the start. I believe it was meant to be used as a ledger. I think it was probably commissioned as a ledger for a local governor. Are you ornate or simple, meant to be shown off or to seem unassuming? I think it is not ornate. It is it's, as you see it, it's fairly plain and simple looking, but it's one of those things where in its simplicity it shows off the wealth of its materials. It is, you know, like a simple Tiffany necklace or something like that. It is its simplicity and its cleanness in its craft that one might display it on their desk, not necessarily open, but display it on their desk to show that this was an item of value that they use regularly, that they can afford to use regularly, not collect. Do your spells share a particular characteristic? Are you a specialized tome or a general collection? How do your spells affect your attitude towards magic? I don't know that my spells share a particular characteristic. I think that this ledger was, again, it was originally commissioned for some local governor, or commissioned by some local governor, and then probably the apprentice at the bookbinder, or one of the apprentice's friends, some ne'er-do-well layabouts, managed to swipe this from the shop and sell it for probably half of what it was worth, which is probably twice what they would see in 2 years' time. But I think as a stolen item, a stolen and resold and purposed away item, I don't think that the spells inside would share any particular characteristics. I think the witch who eventually got her hands on it first, I imagine probably plucked it from the broken body of a teen who ventured too far where they ought not to be, somewhere where she had set up protection, and found it a nice curiosity. And she began writing her spells in it as a nice piece of finery. Let's see. If you like, you can choose 3 adjectives as traits to describe yourself. Consider how these change as the game progresses. I think as the product of finery, I think my ledger is a bit, what's the word? Um, I don't think I'm egotistical, but I am going to write ego. I do have an ego. I do know that I'm a valuable item, and in the theft and trading, I know that I have value. I bring value to those who own me. I also think that I am optimistic. Things have generally gone my way. This is going to challenge my spelling. Optimistic. I think things have generally gone my way, but I believe the right word can solve a lot of things. I think I'm just going to leave it at 2 traits for now. We'll see how things change for me. So, are you a specialized tome or a general collection? Again, originally a specialized tome, but this is in reference to spells. How do your spells affect your attitude towards magic? So I guess at this point I've already been used for spells. So at the point of the start of the game here, probably when I gained sentience is when the first spell was writ into me. I guess we'll go ahead and do this. So each new witch will create at least one spell for you using 3 to 8 ingredients from the 6 elements of air, earth, fire, metal, water, and void. First, determine the intention of the spell, then give the spell a name. I think the first spell that was bound into me was simply a spell of ownership. I think we'll call it the Binding Right. This is a spell that this witch cast directly into me. It is what gave me my mind, my magic. The Binding Right is what woke me up and what bound me to the witch and bound me more specifically to magic. It is how mundane items, or it is one way how mundane items are turned into magic items. I believe this witch thought that the Binding Right would bind this item to them, but instead what the Binding Right does is bind the item to magic and give them the ability to access magic. Let's see, roll a 6-sided die twice. This is the number of ingredients your spell will have. It does say 3 to 8, and this is going to give me between 2 and 12. So let's see. That's a 6. That's a 1. So that's 7. Oops. So we have to roll for each ingredient. The first ingredient is going to be, let's just roll 7 dice. The first ingredient is void. So I believe the first ingredient is going to be the examples they have for void are the airless chill of space, the calm of a resigned heart. I believe the first ingredient is the new moon darkness. This is a darkness that is specifically from when the moon is fully obscured by the earth. It is just a fluff of new moon darkness. Our next ingredient is fire. There are examples here being the ash of a bonfire, a shaft of sunlight. I like the idea of a Binding Right having to use kind of the opposite ends here to pin it in on either side. So I think this is going to be the reflection of a full moon. And you can take this from a window, you can take this from a lake, you can take this from a mirror. I think the best way to take it for a fire element is probably taking the reflection of a full moon off of somebody's eyes. Our next ingredient is metal. I think for metal this has to be... I'm going to note here what these are as well. I'm just going to put void. We'll put fire here. This is metal. This is... For the metal, this requires a shoe nail. I think the shoe nail works itself as simply that. It doesn't have to be a shoe nail, but shoe nails tend to work best as they're small. But any nail will do in a pinch. Specifically any nail that binds one object to another. Next we have 2 5s. 5 is water. The water gathered in moonlight. Still water gathered in moonlight. The tears of a warrior. I think we'll go a little simple for the water here. I think the first water has to be probably the dew. What's a good binding? Morning dew collected before the sunrise, which is hard to do. It's at that point, where the air is just beginning to warm up and the light is just coming up, but before the sun crests the horizon, you have to collect the dew then. I think our other water. What is our other water going to be? I think our second water is the last raindrop. No, it is a raindrop. It's a raindrop specifically that has been hit with thunder. Or hit with lightning, rather. But I am going to write thunder because it's a better word. A thunder-charged raindrop. And this is a raindrop that has been penetrated by a bolt of lightning. Which, they're not as rare as they seem, quite honestly. That's our 2 5s. Let's go to our 4 again. 4 is metal again. I think for metal we have now we have a lot of things to bind, but what about something to bind into? I think this is a single chain link. Chain link like you would use for chain armor, or any number of like linked chain, like linked ring chain sheets, not just like a singular chain that you would use to bind, but rather a loop intended for a sheet of a chain metal. Just one single link from that chain. And our final element here is earth. Their examples being a fistful of red clay, an alfalfa sprout 3 days old. I think for earth, let's see, what do we have? New moon darkness, the reflection of a full moon, a shoe nail, morning dew before the sun before the sunrise. Morning dew before the sunrise, a thunder-charged raindrop, a single chain link, And our final ingredient of earth. I think for this we need one smoothed river stone. And these are stones that are at the bottom of riverbeds. You find them very easily. They're completely smoothed out by a natural tumbler of the river. And this is my first spell. This is what woke me up. And I think being my first spell, does it give me a particular attitude towards magic? I think it makes me think that magic is very orderly. That these elements that they have a rhyme or a reason. I forgot one part here. We have once you decide on ingredients, roll 1d6 to determine how many steps your spell has. Choose or roll from the instruction table to see how best to turn your ingredients into a spell. I'm going to roll 1d6. If it's not 2, okay. So it has 2 steps. Let's roll 2 more for what the steps are. The first step is to boil and steep the ingredients. I think that these are not boiled, but I think they are steeped in hot water. For one full rotation of the sun, I believe they have to be put in at sunrise and taken out the next. Probably put in at sunset. Let's see. Step 1, I cannot type tonight. Step 1 is steeped in fresh boiled water beginning at sunset and removed exactly at the following sunset. And our second step here is chop and strain. So So this is just kind of an easy following here. Step 2. Strain the broth. Reduce. Use reduction as ink. And the ink will be your binding right. I think the binding right is something that eventually goes on as probably hundreds of years pass to be what people think of copyright. I think the etymological origin for copyright was from witches' binding right because they would use it in their spell books. They forgot all the other things that witches would use binding rights on, but it was frequently the first thing in a spell book, and I think eventually became the basis for, not the basis for the idea of copyright, but the basis for the nomenclature of it. So now we choose and describe your spellbook's owner from the following list, beginning with Act 1. I have 3 acts here. Act 1 has 4 witches to choose from. Write about their relationship with you, how it progresses, how it ends, and how you pass on to the next witch. For each witch, choose up to 2 events to incorporate into your time together. Create a spell whenever one is invoked. Describe the coven as you join it and as you leave. The coven we join in Act 2 and we leave for Act 3. How does your reputation mirror your witches? How does each witch take care of you? How did your physical appearance and traits change with each with time and handling. So first we're going to pick a witch from Act 1. Our options are going to be, I'm going to read them in the order, and then we'll roll for which one we get. We have the Novice, the Traditionalist, the Archivist, and the Seeker. So let's roll a d4 here. 2. We have the Traditionalist. Determined to preserve the old ways before they disappear. What do they fear most? So, there are probably some other spells in me at this point. By the time the Traditionalist gets their hands on me, I think this is probably my second or third witch. Sometimes they pass from natural causes. Sometimes they just pass their books on. And at this point, for me, things have been pretty calm. But the Traditionalist copies from me, and they like to they like to make small edits for processes. They like to change ingredients for ones that are better. But it's not even just crossing things out. Like they go over and they'll paint over lines. With they'll paint over them with white paint and then go back once it's dried and rewrite the ingredients in to match up with how they know things have been done. I believe they fear that magic is changing, that people are losing their adherence to the rules, and what this is going to cause is a disaster, is a rift between witches and magic, a rift between witches, and a rift between magic and the world. It's their understanding that these rules were put in place for a reason, that if we don't follow the old ways, that magic could be magic could be lost, or it could, worse, be loosed upon the world uncontrolled. I'm not going to write this. I'm going to use this to write down just the spells only, because we know we're listening. So we are going to roll for an event. And there are 4 sets of 4 events. So I'm going to roll 2d4. So we're going to go to the 4th one, which is to hide and wait. And the 3rd one, you decide to erase your pages. Is this temporary or permanent? What has caused this act? I think that as the Traditionalist is going through my pages, going through the spells that are within me, they go to make an edit to my binding rite. And this is the source of my birth. I don't know what will happen to me if they change my binding rite. I don't know if the written binding rite within me is the spell, if it's me. All I know is that it's the first thing that I know, and it's the thing that I hold dearest among my contents. So I think to prevent them from changing the binding rite within me, I erase my contents. And this is... it's a matter of self-preservation. I think what is happening is that I'm kind of hiding like a turtle in my shell and trying to appear just as a ledger. I don't think this is a permanent erasure. I think that I can, under great duress and under great stress, do this, but I think it is very taxing and kind of a last ditch effort, because this is the first time I've done this. I don't know if I can bring these back. I don't know if I can just hide them or if they're gone for good. But I think in response to this, I think that the traditionalist casts a spell, creates a spell of turning time, not turning time, but turning condition back. It's a modification of a healing spell. It's restoring an item to how it was, similar to like amending, but instead of repairing a thing, you're just winding the clock back on it ever so slightly. Let's see. I think this spell is going to be called. Oh, what's a good, like something like the past, something about the past or restoring. I'm going to do a bit of Googling. I think this spell is called Yesterday Morning. Because I think within the power of it, it's not a way to change time. It's not a way to undo things. It's a way to return an object or an item or a thing back to the state that it was in yesterday morning. So we're going to need some ingredients for this spell. So let's get our 2d6. I don't want to do 10. I'm going to do 2d4 for these ingredients because these are a lot of ingredients, and I want to move through this at a little bit of a faster clip. So we need 3 ingredients. Let's roll our 3 ingredients. Yesterday morning, the first one is a 2. A 2 is earth. We'll go ahead and write these all out, actually. 2 is earth. No. 3 is fire. 4 is metal. Earth. So for earth, a fistful of red K and alfalfa sprout, 3 days old. I think for the earth, this is going to be freshly sprouted this has to be not an easy spell to do, because it's not chronomancy, it is in a way. So I think this would have to be a freshly sprouted, probably an orchid tree. And this would have to be the sproutling of the tree itself, not just a sprig from a tree. This would have to be, the beginning sprout of a new tree. For fire, the ash of a bonfire, a shaft of sunlight. I think to kind of fully represent our thing here, this has to be the coal heart, the charcoal heart, of an aged willow. The charcoal heart of an aged willow tree. This has to be the center of an aged willow tree that has been burnt. And this is its charcoal heart. For metal, what do we have examples here? A scrape of rust, a coin of gold or silver. I think for metal, this has to be a silver thread. Wrapped thrice counterclockwise. How many steps do we have here? Again, we'll use D4 for the steps. Does it want us to use... This is just one step. I think 1 would make sense here, but no. A 6? No, whatever. The rules are there, but sometimes we go in favor of a good idea. So I think the ingredients for this are quite simple, is that you have to braid. This is one step. You have to braid the sapling and string to surround the coal heart. And then apply. And so she does. Well, they do. I've been using they pronouns. I don't know the name of this witch, or their pronouns or anything. But the traditionalist, because of how they keep themselves, they themselves are very secretive. So I use they them for as unknown, not as that's what pronouns they provided. I do not know what their pronouns would be. They do treat me very workmanlike. I think because of their fastidiousness, my appearance is kept very neat and clean. Ego, optimistic. I don't think this is definitely challenged. These things. It's definitely challenged these things, but I think, moreover, I think this is added. I think I'm very protective, not necessarily of my witch, but of my own knowledge. I think after that they do not try to. The spell works and it restores my pages. The spells are not gone forever, and it not only restores the pages, it restores them. No, it's yesterday morning, so it would restore them to the versions that they had edited, except for my binding right. And I think after the bad attempt at at harming my binding right, they choose not to mess with that spell. But I think after that incident, I get shelved, and I'm not used quite as much, except as a reference document. Let's see. Let me make sure I'm looking at the questions here. Yeah, I think as time goes on, I just kind of get shelved, and I'm pulled down from time and time again to be used for reference, but I'm not the focus anymore. By fighting back, I've successfully been left alone, but in a way that that has left me feeling a little underused. So each time you leave a witch, you will pause the game as determined by the rest table below. I think I do have to wait some time before I am found again. And in keeping with the rules of this game, I'm going to roll a d6. There is a period of time that will pass between when I leave this switch and then passed on to my next one. There will also be a period of silence to follow this. It could be anywhere from no silence to 3 minutes, and I will reflect that silence after I roll the die here. So let's see. This is a d6. It's been a few weeks. I think in this time, this is when the spellbook is passed into a coven. The traditionalists did not join this coven. I think that this coven is a newer force. I think that they don't jibe with the old ways, and I think they look to make their own. I think this means power. I think this means creation and potentially destruction as well. But I think that the traditionalist was... I do think that they were killed. I think that they fought against the coven and were outnumbered, and they did not win. And after they passed, the coven came and raided and took all the various spell books. I don't know that I'm afraid of this. I think that this is... it's nerve-wracking, but it's exciting. I want people to write more spells in me. I don't want the things in me to be altered. I want them to be expanded. And I think being within a coven gives me more opportunity to do this. We are going to roll a die for who in the coven gets me. This is going to be the Peacemaker. The options here were the fighter, the dissenter, the guide, and the peacemaker. They recognize the importance of harmony and balance overall. What will they sacrifice for peace? I think the peacemaker, despite this coven being a younger coven, I think that he is older. I don't know. I don't know if witches can artificially extend their lives, but if they can, he has. I think his name is Velek, 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 the Peacemaker. He does his best to curb the more violent instincts of those in the coven and try to turn them to more important fights that cannot be avoided, as opposed to fights that they start. And Velek, for being as old as he is, he's not weak. He's not faint. He is strong, and he will fight if need be, but would rather pursue other avenues. Even within this coven, does his best to not everybody can speak in one voice. Not everybody. It's any group of people is going to fight and going to disagree. And I think Velek mostly serves to keep the chaos low within the coven, and help settle disputes peaceably. He's the peacemaker. I think we've gone over this enough. But what event happens with the peacemaker? This is going to be section 1, number 2. This is to love and nurture. Your witch casts a spell of blessing on the local crops. What is the result? How does this change the perception of locals towards witchcraft? Spell of blessing on the local crops. So what would this spell be named? What is a blessing a witch would give to crops? I don't think that they have trouble growing the crops. I think this is something else. I think this is not even like making them more plentiful. I think this is... Velek is not a perfect man. Far from it. And he doesn't always have the most perfect of ideas. What Velek knows well is deterrence. I think deterrence is his favorite form of peacemaking. Those who have the strength, those who have, the strength of arm and the strength of might behind them are best served as a deterrent until they're out of your control, which is not the part that he tends to see. I think what this blessing is this local village has been plagued for a long time. They're on a trade route. The land has passed between lord and lord on either side of this debacle between them. It's left it pretty weakened and pretty prone to theft from outsiders. So I think Velek blesses this crop to give those that eat it and those that work the land and grow it and eat it, to grow strong, physically strong. I think it gives the blessing of strength. What do we name this spell? What's a good strong... It's like strong broccoli. Okay. This is dumb, but I like it. It's going to be called Might of Men. And I say this not to be gender normative, and I say this not to be like, oh man, strong, because that's not what Velic is about. This is more me, kind of playing off of binding right, eventually becoming what we think of as copyright. Might of Men is people who eat their vegetables. They get the might of men. This one is another origin for a common word. We're not going to do 8 ingredients. Let's re-roll this. 6 is doable. The blessing of this crops is, mothers would tell their children, mothers and fathers would tell their children, and they say to those, like, you need to eat your vegetables. It has the might of men. And I think this becomes the etymological origin of vitamins, because you need to eat these crops to get your vitamins. And so I think that is a bastardization of the blessing for might of men. How many ingredients did we need? We needed 6 ingredients. 364164. So fire, void, metal, air, void, metal. Let's think about what we can use for this spell. I'm also going to put here, this was the traditionalist. And this one was from Velic, the Peacemaker. Fire, I think, what kind of ash is used? There's ash that's used as a fertilizer. I think it's just regular ash. So this would be campfire ash from a, what do you call those? From a soldier caravan. Void. We need 2 void here. What's our first void going to be? Our first void is the silenced whisper. of a field of grain. Let's go ahead and do our second void. Our second void would be the midnight shadow of a corn stalk. I don't want to do too much. I don't want to be too on the nose with growing things here. Would be the midnight shadow of a sheathed blade. We have 2 metals and air. Let's do our metals first. I think we have a plowshare forged blade. No, specifically sword. This is not a sword that's been forged into a plowshare. It is a plowshare that has been forged into a sword. It's our other bit of metal. There's always a saying that is, you know, we have a word for a husband who loses his wife or a wife who loses their husband, but we don't have a word for a parent who loses their child. I guess also a child who lost their parents is in there. You know, we have widow and widower, and we have orphans, but we don't have a word for a parent who loses their child. And I think the metal here has to be the necklace of a childless parent. The air, this has been on, let's see, their examples for air, we didn't have air yet, so their examples for air are a gust of northern wind or a raven's feather. I think this is going to be, this has been on my mind for a while, so this is going to be the fumes of petrichor. And petrichor is that smell, right, I think either right before the first few drops of rain smell or right as the first few drops of rain fall. Let me get the dictionary definition of it. I love petrichor. I love the word. I love that it's a thing. A pleasant smell that frequently accompanies the first rain after a long period of warm, dry weather. To me, it smells a bit of buttered popcorn, but I'm a weirdo like that. How many steps do we need to take for this? This needs, I wish it would stop doing that. 5 steps. Let's roll our steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Three, 2, 3, 4, 1. That is bake, crush. There's a few different options for each one, so I'm going to do these how I think that it should be. Bake, crush, 3, 2, 3. I think this is when we burn. Then chop. Then braid or add. Yes, add. Step 1. Let's see. Bake the sword with the shadow of another. Until crisp. Step 2. Crush the silenced whisper together with the ash and necklace. Step 3. Combine these burn until combine these with ash, burn until even consistency. That's the wrong consistency, I think. Step 4. Chop petrichor finely. Folding into the rest. I like leaving this a little vague. We're going to do step 5 is add to soil. Boom. That's our might of men. Let's see. So your witch casts a spell blessing on the local crops. What is the result? How does this change the perception of the locals towards witchcraft? I think this has its original intended result. I think that this does make the village strong. I think that this works longer. Not longer than intended, but I think this blessing works longer than expected by the townsfolk, but this town becomes known in a way like Sparta was known. I think that this town stops shifting between lord and lord and starts being its own city-state. I think that they are able to defend themselves and nobody fucks with them. This really does endear the town towards the Coven. Velik especially, but the Coven generally. I think that they find themselves being the... I think they offer to be kind of the gatekeep for those seeking the Coven. That if you want to find them, if you want to get to them, you have to come through that town to find them. And if you come here with ill intent, maybe you get a little smack to the face from... Brenda the burly barkeep. I think maybe she takes an elbow over a few skulls every now and then just to make sure that people are not trying to track down witches so that they can find a cat or whatever, or make 1 million gold pieces. This doesn't necessarily make the townsfolk violent. I think that at least for now, for the time being, that the gift is used as intended. It is a deterrent from folks trying to fuck with the town. Let's see. I think we can do 2 witches per act, but I think in the sake of brevity here, I think I'm just going to move on to Act 3. The spellbook leaves the coven. I think as time goes by, no, you know what? I'm gonna roll to see how much time passes, and then we'll figure out how I left the coven. I'm supposed to do it the other way around, but for me, it's a matter of how much time passes. I don't want to be too deterministic, even though I'm the only one playing. I don't know. It's my first foray into single-player games, so we'll see. Let's roll. A few more weeks have passed. I think I leave Velik. I think I leave Velik because Velik trades me away to someone who is trying to learn magic and trying to become a witch, but Velik doesn't think they're strong enough for the coven. Velik doesn't think that they have what it takes to be in the coven, but doesn't want to leave them with nothing. Believes that they have promise, just not with their own group. I think at this point there have been some smudges on my cover. I've been handled, at farms. I've been handled in groups. Velik likes to dog-ear pages, so there are a few dog-eared pages in here. We're gonna just I had a slight tear in my binding that has been stitched back up. Velik is a good man, but he's not the most careful with his possessions. But I think him passing me on makes me a little sad. I had hoped to spend more time with the coven. I hoped that we could be of more use to each other. I think for a time here, I wonder, am I just a trinket? I'm not the ledger that I thought I was going to be. I'm not this official standard document. I'm being used as a tool, and I'm being passed around as if I were a tool, and I don't love that. But, at least I get the chance to go with this new mage, this new witch, and I hope I get to do good things. Though maybe I'm being a little deterministic here about which one I'm going to pick for Act 3. Let me see. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to roll for this one. I think, because I don't really want to land on the skeptic, I don't think Velik would give the book to a skeptic. The other options here are the keeper, the burner, and the believer. The keeper is determined to safeguard hard-earned knowledge. I don't think Velik would give it to somebody like that. The burner is determined to destroy all that came before, and I think Velik could accidentally give this spell book to somebody like this, but I feel like that person would have to have power that they wouldn't be able to hide from Velik, and I think who he passes me on to is the believer. I think the believer is a witch who... I think the believer is a witch who doesn't know magic of their own and is trying to learn it through writ and through scripture. I think my touchstone here is like Luz from the Owl House, that she goes into this great magical world and isn't able to do magic until she figures out that she can do it by writing it down, which is such an old, antiquated, and like unthinkable way of doing magic that people think it's both, like, you'll just don't even think to do it because nobody has to do it. It's not how it's done anymore. So the believer wants to bring magic back into the world. How do they succeed or fail in this? So let's roll our dice. 4, 4. So our event is going to end the game here. And I didn't think we would hit this note the way I'm going to. I didn't think we would hit this note at all. So we're not going to add another spell to the spell book. We are at the end of the game here. The believer is not going to add another spell into the spell book. The event that I rolled here, 4/4, is going to be your witch has decided it's time to pass you on to another. Why and to whom? How do you feel about leaving your old witch for a new one? What is your favorite or strongest memory of your former witch? I think I stay with this witch that Velik has gifted me to. And I don't think this is just some witch who came seeking power. I think that this is Velik's granddaughter. Who showed no promise, no interest in the coven, did not want to belong to this order, and wanted to go out and find magic on her own. And so Velik gave me to her. And we did. We traveled a lot. I spent years, countless years, decades, with this girl. I think Kiara. I think her name was Kiara. Velik's granddaughter, Kiara. I will write her name here. And the first few years were very frustrating for Kiara because she just couldn't do the magic herself. she couldn't do the spells. Whatever it was that allowed these other witches to understand and, to be able to pluck the silenced whisper of a field of grain, or to be able to braid a freshly sprouted orchid tree, or to collect thunder charge raindrops. Just whatever that thing was that allowed them to turn the corner into these spaces. It's a sense that she never developed. But I think that my optimism helped her. And I think that after having been passed around as this trinket for such a long time, my ego very well bruised and tamped down. I was not this noble thing, but I still wanted to do more. I wanted to find more. I wanted to go more places, and I got to travel the world with Kiara. Because while she spent her first 7, 8, 9, 10 years trying and failing to get this magic out of her, she just couldn't. But what she found she could do is teach others. And while she couldn't teach them how to she couldn't teach them how to collect the reflection of the full moon, but if you could collect the reflection of the full moon, she would show you just the right way to steep it at sunset to do your own binding rite. When she was able to find and learn people who knew how to do these things, she used me to teach them. And we would go years between finding a new up and coming witch. It would go so long, but my optimism and her optimism never flagged. She kept my spirits up when they needed to be, and I think that pouring through my pages, I would keep hers up as well when it had been so long since we had found a new apprentice, or so long since we'd even found a new town. But we spent decades going around and spreading this knowledge. And I remember this one time, God, this had to be about 10 years ago. We had been passing through the mountains to the south here, and God, it was so as we're climbing, it begins to rain, and the rain is not that much of a worry. Kiara had her traveling robes on. It kept most of the rain out, kept me nice and dry. But it was just as she crossed the snow line that this rain became a pelting ice, and it was making her knuckles bleed. And at this point, my cover had been cracked and remended as many times, more times than I can count. The stamp for my ledger was almost unreadable. You could get the LE and the R. And despite all these years, Kiara still kept me close. She splinted my cracks. She kept my pages clean when she traveled, she would wrap my whole body in leather to keep me dry. But as she's climbing and we get into this ice storm and we get into this cave, she finds this small little natural cave, barely enough for two people to hide inside. And she found a rat, and it turned out that this rat, I mean, apparently it didn't faze her at all, but this rat spoke up. And I had never interacted much with animals. I'd always been on shelves or in the coven, and even traveling with Kiara, I'd never come across any talking rats, let alone rats that were also witches. And she was trying to teach this rat yesterday morning, and it turns out the rat had a variation on yesterday morning, had its own variation on yesterday morning, called Yesterday's Sun. And Kiara went to go make changes to the spell in me, and I got very nervous. But I realized that she was just making notes in the margin of how to change yesterday morning into yesterday's sun, which wouldn't change an object but would change the weather to how it had been, how the sun had been yesterday. And it was just going from this, I mean, I had stains from her blood on me, and soaked into my pages a little bit, and my pages had gotten wet as she had gone over all this with the rat. But watching her turn her knowledge into a new spell, even one she couldn't cast, that she needed this rat to cast, seeing the sun crest over and just shine down, the rays come down into this cave, and light on her face. I hadn't seen her smile that way since she was 5 years old. And it was great. It was wonderful. I spent a lot of time not being a spellbook, I was a spellbook, but but I was a teacher. And I never expected to be a teacher. But that was years ago. And Kiara, she's become too frail to travel. And she's passing me on to her latest apprentice. And I don't know about this kid. He's rash, he's abrasive, he's a lot of things Kiara is not. He doesn't have patience. He's all vim and vigor and excitement, and he lacks Kiara's pacing and her steadfastness. And when he fails, he gets so sour. I don't know why she's trusting me to him, but I think I'll have to continue to trust her. And so I think it's time to figure out what life is going to be like with somebody else for once. It's been so long, but I mean, hey, it's something new, right?